everyone. Welcome to Briar Haus Writes. I'm Becky Parker, and today it is my honor to be able to have award-winning writer, video recording artist. He's done everything. He's a poet and a former radio broadcaster. Today, welcome Matt Forrest Esenwine. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I will tell you what I usually tell kids when I'm doing school visits. And we were just talking before we got going here, how I used to do voiceover work. Well, I still do some voiceover work, but I used to be on the radio, and I spent good 20 years on the radio doing morning shows and afternoons and call-in dance request shows and talk shows, all kinds of things. And I've developed a voiceover business probably a little over 20 years ago. And then I got into to children's writing. I've been writing poetry forever, and so now I'm in children's writing. I still do some voiceover work on the side, but as I tell kids when I'm doing school visits, I tell them I feel like I am proof that a little autistic kid from a tiny little country town in rural New Hampshire, where it's still a dirt road where I grew up, can grow up to have not just one cool career, but two pretty cool careers.
And the fact that you can do voices, kids love that. They
Yeah.
love it.
My ex-wife, so I got remarried about 17 years ago, and I'm still, fortunately, I'm still very good terms with my first wife. We'd been friends through school, and so we're still friends. And she actually babysat our two kids, and she actually caught the bouquet at my wedding when I got remarried, which is weird, but we get along. And she used to joke that I ruined story time for her, jokingly, because when I would read to our two daughters, I would do voices.
Hmm.
And so she would read to them, and they'd be telling her, "Mom, do the voices, do the voices."
Just like I don't have that voice.
My ex is like, I mean, I can try to do the voices, but they're not going to be your dad's voices.
Yeah, they're going to be different. Well,
Yeah.
tell us what led you to actually becoming a writer, and particularly a children's writer.
Well, I've been writing forever. Again, I kind of go back to what I share with kids when I'm doing school visits. I've been writing since I was knee-high to nothing. Um, I was cleaning out my parents' attic a few years ago. They had to go to the nursing home, and so I was an only child, so I'm cleaning out the whole attic. And they saved everything because I was an only child. Like everything of mine is there. And fortunately, they did save everything. I mean, it was a lot of work. They saved a lot of stuff they didn't need to, but they saved all my school papers. And so I found these journals from like freshman year of high school that I had to keep for English class, and I found a children's one of our projects for creative writing. We had to make a book, and so I found this story that's actually a really cool idea that I really need to write the actual manuscript for, because it's a pretty cool idea. Not well executed because I was a freshman in high school, but good idea though. And I also found a 5-page book of poems. They were just 5 pages stapled in the corner, poems about trees I'd written for my mom. And I think I was probably about 10 at the time. And I'd been given a book of poems back when I was probably 6 or 7. It was called The Secret Place and Other Poems by Dorothy Aldous. And I loved that book. And that was really the thing that I think that stirred my love of poetry, because there are these beautifully worded short little vignettes, like, could be 5 lines, 6 lines. It might be longer, but it's never more than a page or 2 long, and you can say a lot in a small space. So I've been writing forever, just making up stories, writing poetry. I would write skits on because my father had some of the old time radio shows on records, and so when I was a kid, I would play these old records, and I would listen to these old time radio shows, like Lux Radio Theater and on all these, and I was fascinated by what you could do with words, and so I was writing poetry. My first poem that I had published was in a college journal, a literary journal for New England College in Henniker, New Hampshire. And I think I was a junior in high school, and they published this poem of mine, which I thought was kind of cool. And so I've had like adult type poems published in anthologies and journals and things throughout the years, but I had eventually collected these random children's poems I didn't really know what to do with. And so around 2009, I decided to kind of look into, well, what do I do? How do I publish all these children's poems? And that, one thing sort of led to another, and now here I am.
Well, when it comes to publishing, writers really struggle with getting their work published, especially children's books. So, how did your journey go?
Well, like I said earlier, in 2009, I decided I would actively look into whatever I had to do to get published. And so I had a feeling, okay, well, I've got a collection of poems, just random different children's poems, not really any kind of theme, just sort of not to use Shel Silverstein's name, because I try not to write like anybody, and I definitely don't write like Shel, but his collections were just about all kinds of different things. There wasn't a theme necessarily, like there has to be today. Really, most poetry collections are thematic because it helps with marketing. So I didn't know anything about children's publishing or anything like that. I just had a collection of poems. So I started going to an SCBWI critique group about 45 minutes away, and went for about a year, and then I ended up going to my first SCBWI conference, the New England chapter. And that was where I got to really learn a little bit more about the actual industry. And I got to meet folks and connect. And maybe it's the autism, but I don't have, I can't read a room. So I have no fear just going up and talking to people. I'm very, when I was in high school, I was very introverted, probably because I got bullied a lot.
Oh.
But generally speaking, I'm a pretty gregarious kind of guy. And so I wasn't shoving my manuscript into people's faces, but I would say hi and meet people. And so I got to meet a lot of folks like Jane Yolen, who I've known for a number of years, and her daughter Heidi, and several others. Lynn Oliver, I met her at the first conference, and at that first conference, I was talking to Lynn and Tommy DePaula, who was my neighbor. He used to live about 20 minutes up the road. And it was funny. Tommy and I would only see each other at conferences. Occasionally, we'd see each other at the grocery store, but usually it was a conference. And I had asked Tommy. I said, every now and then I'll write something like a poem or something like that, and like I'm my own worst critic. But every now and then I will write something, and I'll think, wow, that's really good. That's really good. Like I wrote that. I don't know if I'll ever write anything that good again. Like that might be the best thing I'll ever write. I said, do you ever feel that way, or what do you do? He said, well, the first thing I would do is go get a drink. So thank you, Tommy. But Lynn, actually, when I was talking to her and Tommy, Lynn mentioned this fellow named Lee Bennett Hopkins, who was an anthologist, and he was in the Guinness Book of World Records for the number of children's poetry anthologies that he had edited, which was almost 130 when he passed
Wow.
away in 2019. And I'll save you the long story, but I ended up, she gave me his name. I didn't know anything about him, didn't know who he was because I was still new to the business. And I ended up connecting with him a little bit later in the year, and he really liked what I was doing. He liked the fact that I wasn't trying to be Shel Silverstein or Jack Prolutsky, or I wasn't, I was trying to do my own thing. I had a solid understanding of actual poetry, alliteration, and wordplay, and rhyme, and meter, and all the things that make it for good poetry. Because a lot of people just like they figure out it rhymes and that's it. And there's a lot more to really good poetry. There's a lot more to it. And so he said, if there's anything I can do, let me know. And he ended up actually putting me in several of his anthologies that came out. Lullaby and Kiss is Sweet. There was a couple from Word Song, which is owned by Astra Young Readers. It's an imprint. They did School People and Construction People, which is an NCTE winning book, and several others as well. And so just through him, he ended up connecting me with Rebecca Davis, my editor, who picked up Flashlight Night, which ended up being my first picture book in 2017. And so it just sort of grew. You know, the more people that you know, the more you get out there, the more you do. Yeah, it starts, and I can't say it grows exponentially, but it does grow. And it definitely does not grow exponentially, but it does grow, and the more I have been in the business now, I left radio in 2012.
Hmm.
We realized that, and it wasn't like we decided, oh, I can make more money doing this because I couldn't, but in a way I could. We crunched the numbers. We realized that if you subtracted daycare for two kids and just my commuting gas, not my wife's driving or weekend driving, just my commuting gas and daycare for two kids, I was netting $150 a month
Wow.
working in radio. Because people think, oh, you're in radio, you're making all kinds of money. No, I had 20 years plus experience with a college degree. I was making 36,000 a year, and it didn't make sense. I loved radio, but I joked that radio didn't love me. So I decided I could be a stay-at-home dad. I could develop my voiceover business, and I could
Hmm.
also try to make an effort to I'd have more time to work on children's writing and be a stay-at-home dad. And that way, when the kids were still very, very young, but we figured once the kids were in school, if there was a snow day, there'd be no problem. If someone is sick, there's no problem. I'm here.
Right.
A pandemic shuts the country down. Yeah, it wasn't the problem for us that it was for a lot of people. My wife works for the local hospital. I was here at home. We homeschooled for a year. We got through it, and so it really worked out well. But
So,
had we not just thought about it and said, okay, what are we doing, and how do we improve this? And I'm not making, honestly, I'm not making 36,000 a year. I'm making pretty close to it, and I'm doing it all on my own, and I'm doing it part time because my primary job is still parent. I've got a kid in high school, a kid in middle school, and I'm still running errands. We've got six dogs and four cats and chickens, and I'm doing all this other stuff. So I'm a professional, but I'm a part-time professional at this point. But I
well, I
just
love though that how you made that decision with your wife. It was a family decision to make that change, and that must have been an interesting transition, but a really good one from
yeah,
what you're
it
saying.
was intimidating. People say how you have to take that leap of faith, and boy, it was, and it wasn't like a lot of guys are they have this stigma like I got to be the breadwinner, and I'm not like that. My wife is far more educated than I am. She's a nurse practitioner. Like she's the smartest person I know, and she's worked in nursing homes and as a laser nurse and an operating room circulating nurse and a primary care provider and infectious disease specialist and a
Wow.
urology hospitalist. Like she's got all kinds of. I'm just me. And so it just didn't make financial sense for me to keep working at the radio station. I loved it, but I said, I really am enjoying writing. I like doing voiceover work. I'm going to try to work smarter, not harder. Because I'm working 45, 50 hours a week at the radio station to net $150 a month? No, it's just
And to not probably
no
see your
reason for that.
family very much.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, what would you say that would be the best advice that someone gave you? Because I really like the fact that you're saying you don't want to write like Shell or any other writer, that you like to keep yourself, intact, and so that no one could ever say you're an imitation of anybody. But what advice would have you been given that you would pass along?
The best advice, I think, is to, and true, to be your own person and be your own writer, but to read as much as you can. And it's it's market research. Find out what's out there. Not just to find out trends, because trends change. So I'm not saying to follow trends, but it was only when I started actively trying to figure out how to get published that I started actually looking into what the market was. In my
Hmm.
mind, children's poetry was Jack Prelutsky and Shel Silverstein, and this woman Dorothy Aldous, who's an amazing she was an amazing poet who wrote that first book of mine. But I didn't know much about children's poetry. I didn't know anything about Lee Bennett Hopkins. I certainly didn't know Jane Yolen. I didn't know Nikki Grimes or Joyce Sidman or Marilyn Singer or Charles Keeney or David Harrison or all these folks
In
who are now
Nesbitt. Yeah.
they're now friends of mine. Like I actually had to go out and research and it wasn't like research like you're trying to research a college essay paper, but it's just reading and seeing what's out there. And once you see the diversity out there, kind of it's a little bit more freeing. Because I find now, I was getting poems published in these adult type journals, and things about love and death and nature and whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but I never felt like adult type poetry was really my thing. I was writing well, and I was getting published. But if you're getting published as an adult poet, generally speaking, you're going to get a poem in an anthology or something. They're going to give you a pat on the back and an attaboy and a free copy of the book, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
For children's poetry, this is publishing, and you're actually getting paid for it. And I feel like it's it's the genre that
It's you.
I've always wanted to write and just didn't even realize it was out there.
Well, when you're writing and the adult topics that you pick, love, hardship, and different things like that, children experience those as well on a different scale. What are the hard topics that you think about when you write for children, and how do you separate writing for an adult in your mindset to writing for a child?
Um, well, I mean, I don't think I ever really grew up, so and again, maybe this is the autism, I don't know, but I still feel like I'm like a 12 or 15-year old. And so when I'm writing for kids, um, I tend to I tend to just sort of have that perspective.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I've written anything necessarily hard. I did write a book, or a manuscript, hasn't been published yet, on on death. It's a little bit different from the others that are out there. Hasn't gotten picked up yet. The one book that was, I don't know if it was, I don't know if I would say it was difficult, but it was a challenge, was A Beginner's Guide to Being Human, which is from Beaming Books, came out in 2022. And it's a creative nonfiction, so it introduces the reader to concepts like compassion, empathy, forgiveness, things like that. And the thing that was challenging about it is I really wanted to present these concepts in a way that kids could understand, that's not didactic and preachy, but
Hmm.
using real life examples. And that took some effort. But I think it came out really well. There's a scene. So it basically is it's a sort of a day in the life. The narrative it starts in the morning and ends in the evening, and it's just different kids kind of going through their daily life. And there's one scene where the kids are in school and they're in the lunch line, and I'm talking about empathy
Hmm.
and stop and think how you would feel if you're another person. Like, and just not we're not talking about compassion or kindness, but we're saying like actually put yourself in that person's place. If a kid bumps into you, in the hallway, well, maybe they just weren't paying attention. They weren't trying to be rude. If someone cuts in front of you in the lunch line, maybe they're not trying to be rude or mean. It could be that school lunch is the only meal they get all day long. And so saying things like that, and when I'm doing it, again, it kind of gets back to school visits. When I do that, invariably there's at least one or two kids whose I can see their eyebrows raised. They're like, "Oh my gosh, like I didn't even think
Think
that
of
was a
it.
thing." And so you bring it to their level and help them understand. There's another scene where there's a an adult who was on their phone while their child is at bat. And what we think we're looking at the scene, the illustration shows what appears to be the daughter kind of tugging on the dad's arm, going, "Hey, kid's at bat," and the father's
Right.
like, "Yeah, it's a very important call." And so the very next scene, we see the father apologizing, and it was very important for me, and for the editor as well. It was important to both of us that we show the adult doing the apologizing. Because I'm always telling kids when I'm doing the school visits, like, we're always telling you got to apologize, right? You hit your sister, got to say you're sorry. You dropped the vase and broke it, you got to apologize. Got to say sorry. Got to say sorry. Sorry. Apologize. But we have to do that as well. I make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes on an hourly basis, and I have to say I'm sorry. I have to recognize that I made a mistake, and maybe I hurt somebody's feelings, or I broke something of somebody, or I forgot something, I screwed up, and you say you're sorry and you try to move on, because making mistakes that's part of being human.
Women.
Apologizing can be hard, but try offering some forgiveness, and maybe you'll get it back.
Do you ever share any of your manuscripts with your kids or any child to kind of get their input before it goes to the editor?
I've shared my manuscripts with my kids usually, yeah, and I'm part of a critique group, so we usually share it. I mean, they're not kids, but they're children's writers, and so I get a fairly good sense of what works and what doesn't.
Matt, will you read some of your work for us?
Sure. I've got a couple of books behind me. Um, I'll read a couple of individual poems first from a couple of anthologies. Since we're talking about poems, and I've got several children's books out, but since we're talking about poems, I figured I would do some poems. So, first one is from this book, School People. And this is one of the Lee Bennett Hopkins books. I was asked to write a poem about the bus driver. And when I talk to kids in schools, I tell them, I love poetry because you can say a lot in a small amount of space. And this is a good example. So this is the bus driver spread. And the illustrator had no idea, but the bus driver actually looks like our kid's bus driver. I gave her a copy of the book because it just looked like her. So this is Bus Driver. Your good morning smile waits behind a folding double door. Another day to work and play, to laugh, to learn, explore. Time goes by so quickly. The last bell rings, and then that smiling face I know so well brings me home again. And we talk about compact things in small spaces. And when I'm doing school visits, I know I keep talking about school visits, but really, this is a good example of why I love poetry. This takes you from the beginning of the morning. They're getting on the bus. Another day to work and play, and time goes by, the bell rings, and then I'm home again. I've just taken the reader through the entire school day. From the time you got on the bus until the time you get off the bus back at home, I took them on an entire school day in 2 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love about poetry. So the next poem I'm going to do is something very, very different, and that poem I just read, that's not a Shel Silverstein kind of poem, and neither is this. This is from the National Geographic Book of Nature Poetry, which came out in 2015. And I happened to share a spread with my friend Charles Guigne, who's known as Father Goose. He's in Alabama. We shared this spread in Nancy Tupper Ling's book, Bless the Earth. We share a spread in that as well, which came out last year. And we wrote our book, Once Upon Another Time, from Beaming Books. We wrote that together. And now my upcoming poetry anthology that I'm doing myself, which comes out in April, just pure coincidence, he and I are on the same spread in that as well. So he wrote a poem about Spanish moss. I wrote a poem about rainbow eucalyptus trees. And that is the bark of a rainbow eucalyptus tree. These things are huge. They're a member of the rubber tree family, but they're massive. And the bark literally looks like that all the way up and down. What happens is it peels off. As it ages, the bark peels off in strips, and it reveals this yellow pith underneath. And as it weathers, it goes through all these different color changes until it gets back to the brown that you would expect the bark to be.
Right.
So these are rainbow eucalyptus trees. Colors borrowed from God's own palette. Celestial greens, reds, ocean blues streak across canvas bark like mischievous brushstrokes of an artful nymph.
That's
And
beautiful.
thank you. And it's free verse, so it's not rhyming, but
Hmm.
there's once again there's a lot going going on in this. A lot of imagery that I like,
Exactly.
particularly the last couple of lines where we're talking about this. They streak across canvas bark. I could have said the bark is like a canvas, or the canvas is the bark, or they're using they're painting on the bark of the canvas, but that was wordy. And so I made I made my own word, canvas dash bark, canvas bark. So now the reader gets what I'm saying in the fewest words possible. And at the very end, I was very specific in how I chose my words. Mischievous brushstrokes
Hmm.
of an artful nymph. That's not easy to say.
No.
Mischievous brushstrokes, artful nymph. I deliberately did that because I wanted, subconsciously, I wanted the sound of the sloppy paint being slapped on the canvas. And you're saying, mischievous brushstrokes for artful nymph, like your mouth is really working. And there's a lot of saliva going on there. And then I will share a couple from here. This is the anthology that comes out in April. And I've been part of a number of anthologies, as I said. I've probably got maybe 40 poems in different anthologies, but this is my own anthology that's coming out. So I've pulled all these different people together. Nikki Grimes, Marilyn Singer, Ellen Wolfe, Georgia Hurd, and Rebecca Dotlich. And these are all poems about rainbows. Not just the rainbow that you would think of as a rainbow, but there's a poem in here about the rainbow scarab, which I'm going to read in a minute. There's Laura Purdy Salis wrote a poem about the rainbow fish.
Oh.
The Gouldian finch, Charles Waters wrote a poem. Actually, Marilyn Singer wrote a poem about the Gouldian finch. Charles Waters wrote a poem about the rainbow lorikeet. Um, and there's poems about the rainbow hibiscus, and so there's all kinds of rainbows. And so this comes out April 1st, as a matter of fact. So one of them I'm going to read. It's at the very beginning. I don't know if you've ever heard of sundogs. It's also known as parhelion or parhelia, and that is a bright spot on either side of the sun. Sometimes you'll see them top and bottom as well. Very often they're on either side, and it's not a common phenomenon, but it's not uncommon. The big difference between parhelion and rainbows. The rainbows are usually on the opposite side of the sun. Like if the sun is over here, you're going to see the rainbow over here, and it's caused by the refraction of light in the water droplets in the sky. This is usually because of the ice crystals refracting, and it's usually on either side of the sun. So it's not on the opposite side of the world. It's on literally on either side of the sun, and they're called sundogs. And so my poem is playful silver puppies chasing tails around, around, circling December sky, but never touching ground. Healing to their master for a moment, then away they disappear to dance again another winter's day.
That's neat. And you're really teaching kids in a really creative way.
Well, thank you, hopefully it's fun, and they're able to glean a little bit of something. Like I said, I wrote a poem about the rainbow scarab,
Hmm.
which is a type of dung beetle. Um, I think the poem was I can't. I'm trying to find it.
Matt, who illustrated that book for you all?
Oh, so this was illustrated by a fellow named Jamie Kristoff, who lives here in New Hampshire with me, and he's an award-winning illustrator. He's done some amazing work, and we're thrilled that he did just some amazing work. This is the peacock mantis shrimp,
Wow.
and the peacock mantis shrimp is pretty cool because they're so beautiful, and yet they're deadly. They have a powerful blow that is likened to like a 22.
Oh, goodness.
It will shatter pretty much any shell that it comes across. And so I wanted to kind of get that sense across. So I wrote a poem called Elegant Danger. captivating beauty with radiant appeal, an appetite of titans, an attitude of steel. Throughout the sea there is no shell her fateful blow can't pierce. Just because you're beautiful doesn't mean you can't be fierce.
There are some beautiful things in nature, but they're so dangerous.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like the brown
Um,
recluse spider is really small, but very, very powerful.
well, we have the peacock spider is in here. Charles Guinea and I both ended up on the same spread. His poem about the oh yeah, here it is. He has a poem called Night Gem about the peacock spider,
Oh,
and then my poem about the rainbow scarab. Glinting a metallic shine like fresh off the assembly line. Your hard work ethic can't be beaten. No lunch for me, thanks. I've already eaten. And that's one of the things I learned in radio. Like I had no idea that everything I was doing in my life was leading up to this because I was writing poems as a kid. I was
mhm.
writing short little skits and recording them with voices on my father's Panasonic cassette recorder. I was I when I was in radio, I was writing morning show skits, and I've written thousands, literally thousands of commercials, 30-second, 60-second commercials, where every word counts. When
Mhm.
you go on the air, you turn on that mic, every word matters. There's something we call word economy.
Okay.
Every word matters, and you can't just keep going on and talking about things. You get in and you get out. I just finished a book that's got like 170 words, and I'm trying to think, oh, maybe I should like, flesh it out a little bit.
Because they say, what is it, for children's picture books, it has to be 500 words.
Usually five to 800. Yeah, I mean, most editors I've come across will tell you the book needs to be as many words as it needs to be. And if
And
your book, if it needs to be 1,200 words, then it needs to be 1,200 words. But a lot of times it doesn't.
and they want the illustrator to be able to come in and team with you to kind
Right.
of bring your picture book alive. Not
Right.
picture book.
That's the thing. Like I write with the idea that an illustrator is going to flesh out half my story. Flashlight Night had 169 words. And when Fred Kaler did the illustrations, he literally tells half the story. The whole story is told within the beam of the flashlight. So and the Flashlight Night is kind of different from a lot of books because it's told in second person.
Hmm.
Usually, like you think of second person, you think of a lot of these meta picture books where the person, like the narrator, or somebody is talking to the reader. But this is true second person, where it's telling you how the flashlight is leading you past here, and it's helping you do this, and you're going through this, and you're doing this, and so the whole story is told within the beam of the flashlight. And that was
Oh,
Fred's idea. That wasn't my idea. And it's a brilliant idea, but that was Fred. With my book, I Am Today, is a book about a young child that recognizes a problem in her seaside town. She notices some pollution that's harming some of the sea turtles. She tries to figure out what to do. She knows, she's been taught right from wrong. She knows responsibility, but she figures out a way to rally the town together and get things cleaned up. And she's very satisfied that she was able to make a difference. None of that is in my text. Like not there, my story is just about a young child. It's a first person sort of I don't want to say stream of consciousness, but it's like a first person account of a child saying, I've been taught right from wrong. I know if something's not right, I need to take a stand. I don't need to wait to be an adult.
hmm.
One day I'll be the future, but right now I am today. That's my text. The illustrator, Patricia Pessoa, she came up with the entire narrative of a little girl in a seaside town, pollution, the sea turtle, there's a factory polluting it, the townspeople get together, there's origami turtles that help with the solution. Like none of that was
Wow.
me. That's all the illustrator. So I really do try to let the illustrator have as much fun as they want.
Does the publisher pick the illustrator for your books, or do you go out and round up that person and then present it to the publisher? How does that work for you?
So with traditional publishing, you very rarely have any say in who the illustrator is. Once
Okay.
the publisher picks up the book, they decide who they want to illustrate, and sometimes they might tell me who they're thinking of,
Hmm.
sometimes not. The the one time that was a little bit different was yeah, and sometimes they'll ask me if I had any illustrators in mind. Like for Universe of Rainbows, I was asked if I had any illustrators in mind, and I honestly didn't because I figured, that's up to the editor. I said I can think of I'll spend some time thinking of them, but I didn't have any illustrators in mind. Sometimes I'll have a particular style in mind, but I know that it's still going to be up to the editor, so I don't worry about it. I don't fixate on it at all. The one thing that was a little bit different though was I Am Today. So I had submitted that to the publisher, Pow Kids Books. Jordan Nielsen was the editor at the time, and I had already worked with her on my book Don't Ask a Dinosaur that I'd co-written with Deborah Bruss. And so she knew me, and we'd worked well together when Don't Ask a Dinosaur had come out. And so I'd completed the manuscript for I Am Today, and I thought it might be the kind of manuscript she'd be interested in. I just had a
Hmm.
feeling that, it might be something that she would want, knowing what she was looking for. So I sent it to her, and she loved it. And so she sent me a link of about maybe six or seven different links of online portfolios of illustrators that she was considering. And she said, here are the illustrators I'm thinking of. Just I didn't know if any of them kind of stuck out at you as being, if you liked any of them, more than the others. But this is what I'm thinking of. I said, okay, great, which she didn't have to do, which has never happened before. And so I looked at them all, and this one, Patricia Pessoa, I said, I really like her style. I said, I think for the tone that we're trying to do, because it's not a silly book, but it's not a super serious book either. But it's her style was it was light, but it wasn't realistic. It wasn't overly whimsical. It just really liked the tone of her style. And Jordan said, "Well, she's actually the one I was leaning towards anyway, so I guess we're going with her."
So you great minds think alike.
Yeah, yeah. So not like I had a huge say in it. She's the editor; she could still decide what she wants to do. But it was nice that we both thought that Patricia, out of the six or seven, that she was considering, Patricia was really the one that we liked the best, and we ended up getting her.
Wow. Well, Matt, I have to say, I love the illustrations in a rainbow universe. It's just beautiful. So, the fact that each one was just incredibly drawn for the different poems was really beautiful. So I can't wait for that to come out in April.
Thank you. I do want to show you this last spread.
Rainbows Beyond. Oh, wow.
So that is the Rainbow Nebula in the constellation Orion. If you're looking at the constellation Orion, his upper left shoulder, on your left as you're looking up,
Hmm.
is a star named Betelgeuse. Yes, that's where they got the name for the movie. But
Right.
the star was named long before the movie was. It's Betelgeuse, and it's surrounded by the Rainbow Nebula. And Georgia Hurd wrote the final poem. That's the final poem in the book, and it's just so striking. I told Jamie he did a fantastic job. And you
Like,
probably didn't notice it, but on that peacock shrimp poem that I shared with you, um, the shrimp is giving the reader a little side eye, which was I told Jamie that was a nice touch. He's like, "Well, I got to show the attitude." I said, "Yeah, that's true."
that's right. It's like, don't get close to me, buddy, or you'll pay for it.
Exactly.
Well, well, Matt, you have been such a blessing to be able to talk to you today.
Oh,
And
thank
your
you. Thank
your
you very
your
much.
work is wonderful. So, is there anything that you would wish that in 300 years, when people are looking at your work, what do you want? What do you want them to see? I've learned from your style.
If they're looking at my work,
They will be.
um, hopefully they'll be able to read it because 'cause they think 300 years back, we wouldn't understand half of the poetry written 300 years ago. We have to really pick it apart to try to figure out what some of the people were saying 300 years ago. Um, but I would hope that, and I'm not saying I say this without any kind of hyperbole, and I'm not saying this. Saying this with no sense of arrogance or ego or anything like that. But I do hope that what I'm writing is timeless. And
Mhm.
I mean that in a sense that it's not the kind of thing that you're not going to understand. Like it's not contemporary. It's it's something that will last. And Nikki Grimes was mentioning I don't know, a few weeks ago, or it could have been a few months ago. I forget. We were talking about uh, children's writing, and she makes the a delineation between children's literature and children's books, and she strives to write children's literature, and she makes that separation. Um, and I do as well. I told her, I said, well, I'm glad that somebody else kind of gets that, because there's a place for all of these different types of books, but I do hope that what I'm writing is still understandable and enjoyable 300 years from now. It may not be, but
Well, I can see that book turning into like a hologram kind of book.
mm,
Can't you? Like if like where
love that
the
one.
the characters come out and
Oh
you
yeah,
yeah. So I think that book will be very well read in 300 years. Kids will be like,
especially
"Wow,
the
mom,
Beetlejuice
turn
poem. You
on the
mentioned
book."
that Beetlejuice poem on a planetarium kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine? I just think that'd be so cool. Well, Matt, I wish you all the best in your writing future,
Thank
and
you.
thank you so much for being part of Briar Haus Writes.
Oh, I appreciate it, Becky. Thank you for inviting me.